Okay, well, it's 6:10, so I guess we'll get started. I guess Mr. Garza couldn't show up today, so we'll probably have him on another time if he can come. But thank you all for coming out tonight. Glad to know that we have a few engineering pre-health students. Before we begin, again, if any of y'all haven't filled out the form, make sure to fill out the sign-in form. So today we were supposed to have Mr. Garza on. So in case y'all do not know, he is the health professions advisor for the Pre-Health Advising Center here at UH. And so if you have any questions regarding what to do for your journey to becoming pre-med or pre-optometry, pre-dentistry, this advising center is open to you as well. And we also have Sarah Hakam, who is the president and founder of EPMS, and who I was, if I'm informed correctly, currently accepted to the ENMED program at A&M. If Sarah, you want to give your introduction.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm a senior biomedical engineering student here. And this year I was accepted into A&M College of Medicine's ENMED program, which is kind of like fairly new program. It's been going for about 3 years. It's a new MD dual degree program where you get your MD as well as a master's in interdisciplinary engineering, which is a new engineering master's the A&M College of Engineering recently approved. And so I've gone through the entire like HPAC process with the pre-health committee here at UH, and I can always like comment on that and speak about it. So I don't know if you want me to like talk about my experience now or like give a presentation now, but I can do that if you want.
Please go, yes.
Okay, so I kind of started off my like whole pre-med journey back in high school. I took this class where I kind of shadowed doctors down here in Sugar Land at like various clinics. And from there, I began my pre-med journey at UH, where I would spend a lot of time volunteering and shadowing over the summer. And from there, that's really what kind of led me to decide that like, I want to do medicine. And so I began, looking into more and more of all the requirements and stuff. And going through the entire process is really daunting, but it's not impossible. And some like pieces of advice I've accumulated along the way include like, don't compare yourself to other pre-meds. So you all have your own unique journey going into medicine. And what medical schools want to see is that you didn't do what other people did, but like you had your own way of like checking off all the requirements, which include, extracurriculars, research, shadowing, volunteering, leadership. They want to see that you explored all of your interests, while at the same time exploring medicine and kind of how your journey led you to decide that you want to be a doctor. And it's really easy to be comparing yourself to other people, especially after seeing what kind of research other people do and other internships that people get. But you always have to remember that you're on your own journey and like you're doing what you can do to kind of get into medical school. There are different opportunities for you and there are different opportunities for others. Something else I've learned being a pre-med is don't be afraid to ask for help. The pre-med nature is like very competitive sometimes, but even when you get turned down by other people, when you ask them for help, there are people who are very much willing to help and give you really good advice. So always ask other people for help. No matter how many times you get shut down, at least one person will say yes eventually. Something else is you don't have to be perfect. So a lot of people see pre-meds like the journey into medical school and think, oh, you have to have perfect GPA, perfect MCAT, perfect everything. But not everything has to be perfect because like we ourselves, we're not really perfect. And when applying to medical school, they give you a lot of room to explain like anything that may have gone wrong, like during your journey to medical school. So you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to show that like you have overcome these challenges that maybe have like held you back or kept you from doing something. And lastly, I guess, getting into medical school is a lot of work and the MCAT is very much daunting, but it's not impossible. It's very much doable and you just have to be able to put in the work. It's tough out there, but like making it to the other side is what really makes it all kind of worth it. And I don't know if Mr. Garza is here, but I had a feeling he was going to comment on the Pre-Health Advising Center, which I went through the process of, talking to, at the time it was Dr. Spillers, and going through HPAC. And basically how that works is at UH, we have our own pre-health advising center. It's kind of, you make an appointment with them and they kind of help you through the process of applying to HPAC and getting into medical school. Basically telling you what requirements you need and the timeline of like how you kind of have to do everything. And so the HPAC office, it's the Health Professions Advising Committee, I believe. And basically, I think when it comes time to apply to medical school, which if you're not taking a gap year is your junior year, but if you are taking a gap year, it would be your senior year, you begin filling out the forms to apply to HPAC. And from there, you submit them. I believe they require a personal statement, as well as the application form, and then like an entire document with with pretty much everything you've ever done in the past like 4 years. And from there, HPAC is responsible for giving you kind of like this ranking. I forgot what the exact rankings are, but they have like highest recommendation, highly recommend, recommend, do not recommend. I remember those are some of the recommendations. And they give that to you. And from there, you can either apply to medical school or you can take their recommendation and maybe decide to better yourself and wait. And so after that, the TMDSAS application usually opens in May. And that's something that you want to submit as soon as possible because the medical school rolling admissions process is one of the biggest factors in getting into medical school. And how that works is medical schools review your application as it becomes complete. So as you submit your primary and then your secondary application. And so the earlier you get your primary, the earlier you get your secondary and then can submit your secondary application, which each school sends out their own secondary application, which is kind of like their own like sets of essays that you have to write for that school. And so once all that is submitted, then the medical school can review you. And the earlier you get reviewed, the higher your chances are simply because, what's it called? Simply because they have more spots open really early on compared to later on in the semester. And that's like a little bit about how the application process works.
Does anyone have any questions? If not, I have a few questions from our forums that we can ask. Okay, I guess we will start off with this one then. How did you write your personal statement? Do you need a special story? How did you approach the question, why do you want to become a doctor, or what inspired you to become a doctor?
So I want to say you don't really need a special story, but the personal statement was a really hard question. The first time I approached it and I wrote a rough draft, I sent it to some professors who told me like they were willing to read it. And they basically told me it was terrible. So that was not off to a great start. But I guess how I approached it was you really have to do a lot of self-reflection and kind of look back to why you decided to go into medicine in the first place. It doesn't have to be like a major story. It can be as like your little initial spark can be as simple as a thing of you went to a doctor's appointment and you had like a really good interaction with a doctor, for example, or maybe you interacted with a doctor because of like your sibling. Like even those like little small interactions, you can take that and write about it in a way that like this was your initial spark and how you kind of followed that all the way through. I guess the best way to approach your personal statement is to remember that this is about your journey to medical school and why you want to go to medical school. So the message that you're trying to deliver with your writing is this is what happened. This is what I did because of what happened. And kind of this is where it took me. So it has to be like a nice, like coherent timeline in a sense.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is, how do you balance life work with studies? So I know you've worked with MATLAB ambassadors. You're currently president for EPMS. You're also a BME, so I'm assuming you're taking a lot of hours as well. So I guess how did you balance all of that together?
I guess the key is to having a really tight schedule. So anything and everything I do is in my Google Calendar, whether it's hanging out with friends or going out to like grab dinner. I put it in my calendar so I can see like what I'm doing day by day. And I can't lie, like I still procrastinate, of course. But the key is to, I guess, use your time wisely. Don't say you're going to study and then kind of just sit and do nothing for hours. Like it's okay to give yourself breaks, but you have to make sure that like you're getting all your stuff done. So what do I want to say? It was like on the tip of my tongue and I forgot. Okay, so what I do is when I'm studying, if I catch myself, I'm at the point where like I'm not focusing anymore. The key there is to kind of just stop and give yourself a break. If you find yourself that like while you're studying, it's not like effective, you want to stop what you're doing and take a break and then get back to it later on. And by doing so, by like giving your like scheduling time and like giving yourself these proper breaks, the times that you give yourself to study and to actually get like work done, whether that be for research or for a job or for schoolwork, will be more effective. So I guess planning out your day accordingly, and in effect, that will plan out like your entire week properly. I don't know if that makes sense.
And that was great. Next question is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome during your journey as a pre-med? Might be a tough question, but
there were a couple. I'm trying to think of like the biggest one or a major one, or the one that was like most meaningful at least.
Or you could go through a couple if you would like to.
I guess I want to say one of the biggest ones was comparing myself to other people. As a pre-med, and then when you know lots of pre-meds, you kind of see what everyone else is doing. Like, oh, this person's doing like this really cool research project, or this person got this really nice internship. And then if you think too hard about it and let it get to your head too much, you begin to go down this spiral where you're like, oh my God, they're doing that. I'm not doing that. Like, am I going to get into med school? Like they're going to get in and I'm not going to get in. You know, it turns into a mess in your head. And the biggest challenge is kind of overcoming that and thinking about like focusing on yourself and what you can do to get into medical school rather than focusing on what other people are doing to get into medical school. So that was a huge challenge, which is why I mentioned earlier, like you really don't want to compare yourself to other people. I guess another challenge, of course, was the schoolwork. Being in engineering, as you all know, we have lots of really difficult classes. So being able to make time to study and focus in all those lectures and classes, especially those more tough, like those tougher classes, such as like organic chemistry, or like the really difficult engineering classes, such as circuits, for example. Overcoming those difficult classes was really tough. And of course, overcoming the mindset of you cannot get a B or else you're not going to get into medical school. It's very much okay to mess up and like in a couple tests or in a couple grades, and like you still can get in. It's not completely the end of the world.
Good answer. I like that one. How many schools did you apply to?
Okay, so I was kind of overkill with the number of schools I applied to. I applied to 32 schools, which is a lot. That is a lot of schools. I saw Jessica's face and I was like, wait. It's a lot of schools. I would say you want to apply to around maybe 15 to 20, but I also knew some people who only applied to Texas schools. It really depends on kind of like what you want to do and where you want to go. Because my reason for applying to a lot of schools was I applied to all the Texas ones. And then I just kind of began like throwing schools in there because the more I waited, the more I was like, oh my God, I should apply to more schools because like what if I don't get into this school? So kind of like to make up for it. So that was a lot. That was way too much. It's also really expensive to apply. So you have to really be a lot more careful than that with that than I was. But I would recommend if you're in Texas, apply to all the Texas schools because Texas schools take more people from Texas than from out of state. So all the Texas schools should already be on your list. After that, choose maybe at least 5 to 10 out-of-state schools where you have a good shot at. So I believe the AMCAS has this thing, I forgot what it was called, but basically it shows you every single medical school stats, average GPA they accept, top and lowest GPA they accept, as well as for MCAT, and kind of how much they cost, what they're looking for, pretty much all the information you're looking for about that medical school. So I would recommend looking into that and then looking into the out-of-state schools, and also thinking about your own GPA, your own MCAT, comparing it to the average of different out-of-state medical schools, and then looking at the stats for whether that out-of-state medical school, like how many out-of-state they take, because for them, you're out-of-state. So, and that's a huge factor for medical schools, because the reason medical schools want to keep their schools mainly in-state is because those students are more likely to stay in-state after they graduate and will practice medicine in that state. So that's a really important factor to look into.
If I recall correctly, applying to the Texas states or the Texas schools, all of that is just one flat fee together, right? So you should probably apply to all the Texas schools.
Yeah,
Okay.
TMDSES, it's all in there. So you might as well check off all the Texas schools.
Okay. The next question that we have is, when did you start studying for the MCAT?
Ooh. So okay, the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I went through the entire Princeton review. I believe it's a 7-book set. It's like about the MCAT, 7-book like material set about the MCAT. So the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I went through that entire like set of books. And then at the time I had not taken biochemistry. So yep, that's the one. it's huge. Oh my God. And very expensive. But I went through that one for the summer. And because I hadn't taken biochemistry yet, I waited to take biochemistry for my fall junior year semester. And then I used that winter break to just do test bank questions every single day. And I took a practice test at the end of every single week. And then at the end of the winter break, I think like 2 or 3 days before the semester started, I took the MCAT. And then just went through it. It was a really long test.
I hope you did well on the MCAT then. Follow-up question to that. Do you recommend Princeton, or did you use supplemental information? Like, what is it? Blueprint for questions, or what is it? Not John. So another one that you practice CARS questions on. I forgot what the name was.
I stuck to the Princeton review for like all the material I need. But for AMCAS has this like online set that you can buy. It's like a bunch of test bank questions for each category, and then a bunch of practice tests. So I used that my entire winter break, but for the summer, I stuck to the Princeton review. And that worked out for me. I know a lot of people use, I believe it's called Anki. Those are like sets of online flashcards. I know lots of people use that, and they say that also works really well for them. I personally just never looked into it, but I hear that works really well. That's something more I'm going to look into now I'm going into medical school, because as I talk to more and more like current M1, M2, M3 students at A&M, they all say like they have different Anki sets that are passed down to all the different medical classes.
Gotcha. Next question. Did you have any previous experience, so internships, co-ops, research experience, besides shadowing doctors and volunteering?
Okay, so I never did any internships or co-ops. However, since sophomore year, I took organic chemistry. Since then I've been doing medicinal organic chemistry research with my honors orgo professor. So he presented his research to us on the final day of class. And since then I was really interested. So I asked him if I can join his project, and he said yes. So that's a project I'm still on today. Less than before. I believe when I asked him, I used to work maybe like 8 to 10 hours a week in his lab, but that was the research I was doing I believe, the second half of my sophomore year and for my entire junior year. For volunteering, so between my freshman and sophomore year, I traveled to Lebanon. There is when I shadowed a doctor, but I also volunteered as an EMT over there. And that was a really great experience. That was something I talked about a lot in my own essays. But then another really great volunteering experience that I kind of like share with anyone and everyone I know is Houston Methodist Hospital, the one in the Texas Medical Center. It's really easy to sign up there and become a volunteer. And they have shifts like every single day of the week at all different times that you can do. And so I believe I started doing that last year. I signed up to be a volunteer for the hospital. And every Sunday I would just go volunteer for 4 hours. And obviously, like after a couple of months, like those volunteer hours like kind of racked up. And it's a really great experience because one of the volunteering positions they have at Houston Methodist is a patient services volunteer, which basically you volunteer and help out the nurses on like different patient floors. So that's what I always recommend to everyone because with all of their days and time slots, you can really like fit it in somewhere with your schedule.
Okay. Next question is, how many credits did you take during your junior and senior year?
I believe my junior year, I might have taken 16 hours each semester. Last semester I took, it's last semester and this semester either 16 or 15. I don't remember the exact number.
Still, that's a lot for senior year.
Yeah, it is a
Especially with
lot.
applying to med school.
Yeah, it's because I added on the pre-med courses, which for BME, like I think it's 2 extra courses maybe, but I did a chemistry minor also.
Okay.
So that's added into it.
Yeah, I think pre-med track is 1 biology course and then 4 BME related courses, if I recall properly.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then another question is, does it really matter how long it takes for you to finish your undergraduate degree?
Mm-mm. That's actually something I actually haven't heard that question before. No, I don't believe so. Like not at all. They just want to see that like, you've done something like to pursue medicine throughout all your years. Whether you took 4, 5, or 6 years to finish your undergraduate degree, they don't really care about that. They just want to see that like you finished your degree and you've been doing well and that like you've improved throughout your like years.
Another thing I would add to that is like, yeah, so not all students are traditional. So some students don't apply to medical school right after undergraduate. So I think my plan at the moment is to go to industry first and then apply to medical school. So that's pretty much not traditional as well. But there are also students who go to apply to medical school at like 30 or 40. So that's also not the case as well for them.
Yeah, now that match day has passed, at A&M College of Medicine, we have a group me with a bunch of like our class and different M1s. And I can tell you lots of people who are going to be in my class we have a lot of like people who are like married with kids who have like been in the industry and now they're like coming back to do medical school. So there's no like perfect time. Like you can always go back into it.
Yep. Okay. I think we have one more question then. Would you go back to like, let's say your freshman year or sophomore year or somewhere, would you go back to do something different or choose something different? Or I guess, do you have any regrets that you wish you would have done during your undergraduate?
When I think about it, I was definitely thinking about this the other day. There are lots of things I would go back and maybe do better or do differently. There was definitely some times in freshman or sophomore year where I like wavered a bit, where I wouldn't take certain things as seriously as I should be taking them, or where I felt like I kind of just lost sight or like lost track of like the end goal. So if anything, like knowing what I know now, I am tempted like to say like I would go back and like do it a lot better. But because everything like ended up working out in the end and I was able to like comment on that journey and like it worked out, I'd be like, oh, okay, like this was good. But yeah, some of my like biggest like regrets and like things I would change do involve like kind of losing sight of the end goal of like what you're trying to accomplish and all that. So I would say that's like really important to always like keep in mind. Don't be thinking every day like, oh my God, if I fail this quiz, I'm not going to get into med school. That you don't want to do that. But you do want to like keep in mind like what you're working for in the end, but also like be realistic with yourself. Like it's okay to mess up, but like this is what I'm trying to get to, you know?
They're very great answers. I totally agree with all of those. With that, does anyone else have any questions? Or Jess, do you have anything else to add, I guess? Okay, we have one more question. What could one do as extra apart from GPA to make their statement look nice, apart from volunteering, shadowing, and research?
If you're really passionate about something, whether that be like maybe like a sport or a book or some sort of philosophy or idea, when you're really passionate about something or you really love something, it shows. And it shows through how you talk about it and it shows through your writing. So talking about that, even if it's like a really simple thing that you're passionate about, talking about that is like a really amazing thing to see, especially for medical school like admissions committees, because once they see that you're a passionate individual, they'll see that like if you're passionate about this, you're also passionate about your goal and like doing medicine, like what you're trying to accomplish. So that really helps you. It really helps you stand out. It's like seeing that passion and kind of seeing the excitement that comes with you and like what you want to do.
Another thing I want to add to that is that they want to see the human side of you as well, that you're not like just a robot. Oh, I'm going to check this off my list. Do volunteering, done. Clinicals, done. High GPA, done. MCAT, done. They want to see like, oh, I am good at all, well, not really good, but like I'm experienced in all of these things. And like I'm passionate about each of these things and I still want to do medicine. So we have Shanze, did you have another question? You had your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to ask. So this is the one thing I struggled the most about, and like you talked about it, was writing personal statements. And for me, the issue is trying to find the balance between talking about what you bring to the table and also showing that human side of you. So it's like for me, it's difficult to understand, okay, do you want it to be completely very technical? And then how far do you go with your little story? How far do you go with your personal aspect? That I think that's like sort of what I just struggle with.
Those would be controlled. Yeah.
So the biggest mistake that they say people make when writing personal statements is actually getting too technical. So something I think Dr. Spillers would say and Mr. Garza would say is you don't want to be technical in your personal statement. It's not a resume. You're not going down the list of everything you've ever done. You're kind of just telling the story about how you got to the point you are, which is applying to medical school. So I guess maybe to help is in my personal statement, I start off by writing about this like 3 sentences about like the initial spark, like what initially sparked me to go into medical school, like that story. And then I began talking about how I like explored that and like my thought process throughout different periods of time. So after my initial spark, for example, I talked about how I joined my high school class to shadow physicians. And from there, I talked about like me deciding to go into engineering because of this, and that. And then how while doing my engineering degree, like I had this opportunity to go shadow a doctor And then shadowing that doctor, I talked about how that made me feel personally and what I felt like while shadowing a doctor, what I enjoyed about that, and how upon like, upon like that shadowing experience ending, what I did in order to kind of get to the point where I was, which is writing that personal statement. So I believe what I wrote about is after that shadowing experience, I returned to America and I continued my engineering degree because I wanted to be strong in this, and that. I wanted to, I think I talked about, what did I talk about? I talked about, oh yeah, then I talked about my volunteer experience at Houston Methodist Hospital. So I talked about like what I learned from that experience and how that made me feel about being a doctor, kind of what I learned from that experience. And that accumulated into me, like my final sentences were just wrapping it up and connecting it to the initial spark and how I felt like at this point compared to how I felt at the very beginning. That's kind of the route I took. I don't know if that made sense, but you want to avoid sounding like completely just technical, like that you're just like spitting out like I did this, and that, because they already know what you did. Like everything I wrote about, they already know I did that from my application. They want to see kind of what you learned from doing that and how you felt. What was your thought process? Why are you doing this? If you go through your entire personal statement and you still don't, like you still have not answered why you want to go into medicine, then you didn't do it right, basically. I can take follow-up questions on that also, because I feel like I didn't explain it as well as I probably could have.
No, that helped a ton. Thank you.
We do have a different question. Do you want to ask this yourself or Shub Patel? Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, it's Shub, but you're fine. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for all this. I had a question. I am actually very interested in joining the Army, and I am taking an ROTC program right now. And that has added up a total of 25 credits to my entire degree plan. So it's like 130 plus 25. And I wanted to know if, like, mentioning that on my statement, does it make it any different, like, as part of my story, right? If you get the question.
I think I get what you're trying to get at. So it's not about just mentioning it. It's if that experience was meaningful to you and you felt like you learned a lot from that and like you've grown a lot and you've become a better person from that, then you want to mention it in terms of this has allowed me to grow like this, or this taught me this, or like you don't want to like just mention the experience. If that experience was meaningful to you, you want to talk about it and how it helped you in the long run, like how it helped you grow as a person and what it all like meant to you, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I believe when you're doing all your HPAC stuff to apply to medical school, the activities document that you have to write to be submitted to the Health Professions Committee, where you state kind of everything you've ever done in each of the different categories. The reason that they make you do this is because by doing that, you were kind of already doing the TMDSAS application or even the AMCAS application, because in the application portals, they ask you for everything you've done in those same categories, and they ask you to write a description. So for HPAC, by submitting that document to HPAC, you have to write everything you've done as well as details about what you've done. So in those details, sometimes you want to really talk about, it's like in a resume, how they say like using action verbs, you want to talk about how it helped you and what it did. But for your medical school application essays, that's where you talk about really what that experience like meant to you, like how much it meant to you and how much it really helped you. Because I can put on an application that I worked at Barnes & Noble, and I can think that's a unique factor in my application, but it's not going to mean anything unless I talk about why it was unique, why it meant a lot, and like how it helped me grow as a person.
Another thing is that I'm not sure if like this is always the case, but I think you want to also link your experiences to like why this is helping you pursue medicine, right? So like, sure, ROTC is a unique experience, but you also want to link how that has guided you towards being a medical student or a pre-med student or a pre-health student, right? So it's not just including this just because of an experience you have, but also why it's guiding you towards becoming pre-health. Does anyone else have any last minute questions? Okay. Well, this was the presentation that Mr. Garza has sent us. I will be sending this one out through our contacts or through our emails, most likely. Besides that, Sarah, do you want to quickly shout out your organization real quick?
I don't know what you mean by shout out.
Introduce it, what you guys do.
Pretty much, there's not a lot of engineering pre-meds at UH, and a lot of the reason for that is there were many freshman year and then sophomore year, and we kind of like tend to trickle down or switch majors or kind of just like give up on going a certain journey or certain route. So the whole point of the Engineering Pre-Medical Society is even if you're not engineering, you can still join because we have lots of opportunities and stuff. The whole point is to kind of like create a community for engineers who want to go into medicine, because more and more people have been saying that the future of medicine is in engineering, and we're expected to see like a rise in like the kinds of dual degree engineering and medicine programs. I know University of Houston, for example, the Akais are really interested in having a similar program to ENMED here at UH in the future. But the whole point of my organization is to kind of like, I guess, create a community of a bunch of engineering pre-meds so we don't feel alone. And so we have like each other to support, because it's very hard sometimes balancing engineering and medicine. So we don't necessarily hold like we don't have any fees or like any like required like meetings or anything. Our main goal is to kind of send out a bunch of information, give advice, help people as much as we can, and of course have events where everyone and anyone can like connect with each other and help each other out. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Shanze, do you want to take a picture real quick?
Yes, I would love to take a picture. If you guys would just open, like if you all guys want, you can just turn on your cameras and do the quick sign. And we'll take pictures real quick. Yes, go to the quick sign. Thank you, everybody.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for doing this with us tonight. And again, congrats on your acceptance. I hope you do very well during med school, and I wish you good luck during your journey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming out tonight as well. Hope to see you all soon.